All right. Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. I'm back here with Stuart Mitchell. It's been a long time, my friend.
It has indeed. I was trying to figure out. I think it might have been 4 years. So good to be back on the show.
Um, the last time was when I went to visit LA and we did a podcast. Was it West Hollywood? Is that where you guys were based?
We were in Culver City.
Culver City. And we got a couple of podcasts done with you guys and your guys there. And then we had an impromptu meet out late at night in a bar afterwards.
Yeah, I don't remember that one so well. I definitely had a few, but it seemed to be a good local spot for many British recruiters, and I think that's there were a few of us in there.
So you're not in LA anymore?
No, unfortunately not. I missed the sunshine. I relocated back to the East Coast in just over a year ago. So decided to make the jump, be closer to my family, to my wife's family, as we started a family ourselves. But also the work from home situation. I continued to operate in Southern California for a year after that, but yeah, the work from home flexibility allowed us to be where we needed to be, which was great.
I was obsessed with looking at LA and the homeless scene and all of that during COVID because it looked like a post-apocalyptic nightmare. What was it? What was it like being in COVID there?
Weird. It was a really, really weird city to be in. I think in some essences it was great. And you look at if you can't do anything, but you can be outside. There's probably not a better city to be outside because you can eat outside all year long, go
Mm.
for a walk by the beach, get on a bike, go for a run all year round, even if you're not a fitness fanatic. Like from a mental health perspective, I think we were pretty fortunate. That said, there were a couple of like homelessness was more accelerated. You look at some of the jobs that were affected by COVID, so it pushed more people into homelessness in California. So you were right. Like there was, a lot of, some of the areas in downtown LA, Hollywood, Venice that were just smoked, even to the point where when I was leaving California, they actually just entirely cleaned up Venice Beach from the homelessness and kind of pushed them more towards downtown. But it kind of took the vibe away from Venice. It was a really weird feeling where, the homelessness kind of added a edge and a vibe to it. But when it was gone, it was like, it doesn't feel the same anymore. It was really, really weird.
The draconian laws that they put in California shut down a lot of restaurants and that as well. I'm sure it affected the overall
Yeah.
vibe.
Yeah, I think, people that have left or go back now, same with New York City, like it doesn't feel like the same place that it was before. California is a notoriously liberal state. And so things were enforced a lot more than perhaps they were in a Texas or a Florida. And yeah, you're right. Like it cost some people their livelihood and some came back, but it wasn't the same. And it was sad to see. And it is, we still go back and it doesn't quite feel like that 2019 Brennan's vibe that we had a few years ago.
Yeah. Right.
That I hold with such good memories. But it's still a great city. But things change, and it got hit pretty hard with COVID.
So whenever COVID hit, the remote working accelerated. What was that like for you as a recruiter with your clients, and then you working for at the time an established British recruitment agency that firstly would have you in the office?
Yeah, so first 3 months for me were like, hey, this is not a full-time solution. This doesn't work. We lost all our culture. We lost, this isn't right. Like this is not how you do recruitment. This is not how you train, whatever. I was super against it. And so it was odd. And I think it was always an expectation that we would go back at some point. I think that expectation was always set there. We had, as a business, we'd set up, and our plan was to hire locally. And then, and again, I think everyone struggled those first 3 or 4 months in recruitment. I think you ask any US business owner, that kind of Q2, March to say June or July of 2020, everybody struggled a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the taps went, and everyone decided that they were going to hire remote, and things just went really well. And we pivoted our culture at Stott and May, where I was at the time, to be a remote first business, come what may. Although kind of considering hiring in Los Angeles, and we ended up, my career. I mean, I was on a pretty good trajectory, but it continued to rise and rise and rise. And I had some of the most efficient years of my career working from home, to the point I'm now. And I never thought, if you'd have said this 4 years ago, that I'd be kind of pro work from home, I'd have laughed in your face. But now, kind of flipping the script, I'm now very pro work from home. Given what we did, we set up a really effective, management environment, team environment. But it was a shift, and I think one of the things that we struggled with is, that kind of traditional mentality, learning and development, coaching, and we had to make some pretty big structural changes, particularly when it came to hiring, to make sure that they were enabled. And I think that's something that businesses are still trying to figure out now, is like, okay, if we hire this person remote, how do they get into our culture? How do they learn the same way that everyone else is learning? Like, it's the same challenges, but my viewpoint definitely changed to the point that now I have my own business. At least at this point, it's a remote first company.
Yeah, it's tough, right? And I've been remote for years and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But at the same stage, it does come with its limitations if you're building a sales team, especially in the recruitment industry. So typically you'll find that 1 in 3 survive on graduate hires, and nobody can beat that industry average, even if they say they can. If they have for a while, they usually get caught and then they don't. And I think it's probably pretty true with even our own business. Now, we've gone from a point where we hired a lot of virtual assistants to now we would hire more TA skilled people from Eastern Europe. And that was a big shift for us. But even with that, it's really hard to get people who can get your culture, know what you're about, and be accountable and make things happen, and not expect that it's always going to be easy. And it's a real challenge. And one thing I would never do is hire people without experience if it's a proper 360 type recruitment job.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. And I think that definitely hampers businesses that are trying to go for that kind of scaled exit. I still think, if you're looking to kind of grow at an extreme rate, we've seen it in the industry, the best way to do it is to manufacture your own talent, right? It's rare that we see businesses that are commercially wise enough to go and hire some of the senior players from the industry, because they're expensive, right? And you can't go and hire 50, 100 people at these high numbers and assume that they're going to work in your environment anyway. So I do think it is limiting, particularly if you're looking at that growth mode. And I'm looking at my business in junctures of, okay, let's get from 0 to 1, and then then we reestablish. And I think something that some really smart businesses are doing is even if they are hiring remote, trying to be a little bit more deliberate around that in terms of some of the hubs. I know that's something that you've mentioned in the past, is having hubs. I know some businesses that have done it in, Tony as an example, in Belfast, they were looking at remote, they bought a hub there. Toby, sorry, he'll kill me for that one. But some businesses that are hiring down in Florida or Austin and trying to get those hubs together. So I think if that's the case, there is, an opportunity to build cultures, even if it is, getting together once or twice a week, or even a few times a month versus a traditional 5 days in the office. I think there's something there. And again, if I do decide to push this business into more of a, hey, let's scale, let's exit, let's, look at PE or acquisition, I think I will have to be, probably commit to something that is a little bit more outside what I'm doing today, get an office, get some more people together.
Yeah. And one of the things I was saying to you before, you're at an interesting place in your life as well. So I have a 5 and a 4-year-old now. So we very much, and he's almost 6 actually, and the other guy's nearly 5. So like, we feel like we're through a lot of, like, we drop them off, then they go to nursery, then they're in sports, then they come back and have their dinner, and we're involved, but we're way freer than we were paying for 2 childcare situations, and mother-in-law not wanting to do it all the time and saying they would. And picking up here and there. And like, it's very hard when you're in that place in your life and setting up a business and buying a house and moving states. And so you're doing all the stuff that we've kind of gone through. And I see myself on the other side of that now. And, I was thinking, I wouldn't mind having an office full of some people I could have fun with here in Gibraltar. Like, because at the moment I take the morning meeting twice a week, and on that we'll have our team in the Philippines, our team in Eastern Europe, some of our principals in England and Ireland, and we have a really structured meeting. All the rest, they're all women. They're all in Charlotte's image. It's not my idea of my bit of, like, they're fun, but like it's not what I had at Robert Walters, where it's like all guys like me, and I just know that we can go and have fun and all the rest. So I was thinking, like, it would be nice to have that bit of the next bit of the business now. So I would say that you probably will reach that once you establish that. And usually what will happen is you might, like, because you're really credible in this space, you'll attract people to come join you who are well known and networked and all the rest, and they'll reach a stage in their development where they'll come to you and say, hey, I need a bit more than this. And you'll say, well, the only way you can do more is by hiring and training in your local area, and the hubs will spring up.
And that would be dream world for me, is to kind of outsource some of that responsibility. And again, something that I'm cognizant of is, when I created this business, I don't want to just create a good place for billers to come and make decent money and leave, right? There has to be some growth in their journey. Otherwise, people get bored, right? You could be doing as well as making more money than you ever thought you would, more responsibility. But if you're not continuously growing, people do get bored and they do seek something new. And I think sometimes we're very, I think sometimes we just assume it's money and try and throw money at that problem. But people do want more. And I think, to your point, right, we've had some, particularly last month, but we've had some really good wins at, both like deals and new clients and dealing with situations. And nothing beat, and you probably had this at Robert Walters, and I've had this over my career, hey, like, we should go and celebrate this. Like, let's go get a dinner. Let's go get finish early, whatever. Like, it's great, right? And I think, lunch club can be a little bit much, the formalities of it, but like, hey, we nailed this situation. Let's go get a couple of beers tonight, unplanned, and celebrate. Obviously, that's a lot more difficult when you're hiring across the country or even in different countries. Like, and I do miss things like that. And I think that's something, sometimes if you make it too structured, you can actually suck all the fun out of it. Like, hey, we're going to fly in and we're going to do this and this, and that's great. And that is important, but unstructured celebrations, but also fixing stuff, right? Like, hey, we had a really bad day, or we had a disagreement, or we had like those diffusing situations. In my day, at least when I was kind of coming through, was like best done over a beer or over coffee outside of the office. Like, I think some of those things, like, are things that you can't replace. And again, like, I definitely do miss that. And I, again, wouldn't change the fact that I can be around my kid, like my 1-year-old right now, but moving forwards, I could see myself going back. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and things do. I think probably, so one of the ways that we do that with our remote team is we fly them into London 2 or 3 times a year, usually in and around. So actually, the Filipinos, we don't. We send them money to go take themselves out for dinner and all the rest while the team do that. But we tie it in usually with a RecWired event. So we run the WhatsApp groups that you're in. We have the independent recruiter group, and then we have the one for the scalable recruitment firms. And they're very different vibes and all the rest. But what we do is we throw these events with the partners every couple of times a year, and then our team go into that, and then they get to see, oh, right, so this is what it's like now.
Actually, like,
yeah. So they get to see what it's like to see 50 testosterone filled CEOs talk about their business, and the same with all the recruitment partners and vendors, and get a real taste for the industry. And it's funny, like, all the people we've flown into the events, they're the ones who've stayed in our business over the long run because it's all made sense. They've got it. They got to see the personality types, and then they're like, okay, so now I know when I'm speaking to a recruiter, they'll fit that. And it's that bit of realness that's hard to get in a remote business. You mentioned events and maybe like scaling a business. Have you put a number on the amount of people you want to grow to within the next 4 years, or is there?
Yes, to an extent. I've always put EBITDA above everything else versus headcount versus I'm a profit guy, I'm a numbers guy, and that has always been something that's far more important to me than headcount. I think headcount can get a little arbitrary, and I also think sometimes if you're as focused on headcount as you are about profitability and scalability, and businesses tend to, everyone uses the word scale in recruitment, but they tend to grow. They tend to reduce that profit per head. And so that's something that I'm really cognizant of. In an ideal world, 15 in 4 years is a good starting point for me. That may sound small, that may sound, but my expectation is a 600K revenue per head per business. So that's for me, that's a lot of money, right? And I think, I have done that. I have achieved that. That's something from a team perspective, even with some team members that were past me or whatever, I have achieved the 600K revenue per head team. And so that's something that I really want to continue to laser in on. And that may mean that there's some hires that just can't do that. And there are some hires who get past that and want to go and do what I did, because, you see, like if you are hiring somebody who is moving forwards and doing $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million a year, they're probably going to get the itch unless you do something sensational by means of LTIP or equity or ownership to keep them. And I'm cognizant of that, but it's really hard to keep overperformers. And so that's something that I'm trying to do. But 15 in 5 years seems feasible. But what I will definitely do at the end of each year, like, we're ahead of our year one numbers. That means that we're probably going to be ahead of our year one headcount. So I will change that. I will move that. Like, that's something that I'm not going to laser in on a number. And
so that's a nice plan. I'll give you my 2 cents worth on it. I think there's no way in this world you keep top performers, regardless of what model you put in place. The one that I've seen work, if you want 16 people, is Joe Mulling's one, where he controls the client flow, and then everything else is a delivery function, because that means they're reliant on him. But if you have a 360 gang of 16 people, they're going to feel they don't need you after a while in the same way. Whereas he has that difference. And I think that's the only one I've seen that works from that. And if you look at search firms as well, they're not doing much BD. There's, they have a few relationships that then their delivery is all done for them. And why would they leave? Because all of this is done. So it's really hard. And that's why people don't just stay to 16. They spread the risk, and then they get the next people in. So the pricing and the breaking up that model piece is really key to it.
Yeah, of course. And I've been following. I find Joe's journey quite fascinating. I'm really impressed by what he's doing, and I think the reputation that he has in his industry is like untouched. And so I thought, I'm trying to look at some of the things that he is doing, because in my industry in security, I think I'm not there yet, but I definitely think I have a really good kind of level into the important folks of that industry. So, it's something I would absolutely love to replicate, but also realize, I am no way near what Joe is doing. But I'm absolutely fascinated by the guy, the way he goes to market, some of the events he hosts, his media stuff, like top tier, and something that, even at a 10th percentile, I'm trying to emulate.
Yeah. It's but when I break it down, it's that one piece, like, like who controls where the deals come from and who controls the delivery function. And I think you've been brought up in 360. So have
Yeah,
I. It's very hard to let that go, isn't it?
I agree. I agree. And it's something, again, but I also look at the multi-billion-dollar companies, right? I look at the businesses, Hayes, Tech Systems, whatever. Like a lot of it is kind of senior partners holding these very key relationships with banks. With it is a lot of 180 and 270 to some extent, and so there's pros and cons to both, right? But I do think in the US, like 180 and 270 is a lot more commonplace than true 360 recruitment. But then it's like, okay, how much do I have to work as like a chief BD officer or whatever to continue to stem that flow? And then I'm probably paying, I'm also used to paying 360 comms. Should I be reducing that? It's such an interesting, nuanced argument
It
that
is.
definitely will take some work over the years. But also, like 360 is hard, right? Like a 23-year-old, 22-year-old coming, hitting the phones, gaining immediate credibility to a 40, 50-year-old executive that's getting 100 phone calls a day. Like I see the value of it both ways, but yeah, I think it's definitely. And then you look at some of the newer businesses that are going kind of down the like SDR route, like which is true. It's a tech sales, which hey, my job is just to connect Stu or whoever to the decision maker. Like there's so many different ways to structure this, but you're right. Like we grew up in 360. It's so hard to
Right.
to like map out a business in any other
Yeah.
way.
And I think, like I've interviewed Joe a few times, and he's taken a process to win the media battle, and
Yes.
the data battle and the events. And there's the that's the BD machine, as opposed to
Yeah.
ad chasing all day long and making that happen.
Yeah.
But and then you mentioned the PLC version. They don't really like. They probably won't agree with me on this, but I don't think they care about the big billers. Like
No.
I think what they want is middle of the road who can train rookies, and if
Yes.
they can, if they're middle of the road and the risk is spread and everything's done right and they're following the process, then they're happier. And I suppose the other bit you're going to have to look at, and here's where it gets interesting, is who's going to buy you.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and the business that you're going to build is going to have to be structured around that person who's going to go, do you know what? I want that as a bolt-on, or actually you're going to fit our culture, or is it somebody who buys it off you in the future? Or
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? Because some of the behaviors that drive a straightforward buyer is actually the culture that I don't like, right? Like, hey, let's nail down these. And I'm not anti KPI. Like I know that that's an ugly word in recruitment. I think for me, revenue and first interviews are the first thing that I always look at. If that's good, I don't tend to get too below the service. Then obviously you can kind of pick apart the data. So I'm not anti KPI. That said, I'm not trying to hit key metrics to make myself look attractive from a purchase standpoint, which I think some businesses do, and that's some of the behaviors that I'm not trying to achieve. I think, look, we may be more attractive in 3 years as a 10-person bolt-on for a UK business that wants to take on cybersecurity from, or an Australian business, APAC, that's like, hey, it's easier to buy Stu's business than it is for us to go and do it ourselves. That's like right now. That's
just give him 10 million and let him
that's
ride
it,
off into the
and just
sun.
let
I'm
him
not
do it.
asking for a
That's
lot.
exactly. That's it. But yeah, I mean, look, that's the obvious one, is somebody who like is desperate to break into this US market. And over the years I've had plenty of people wanting me to do it for them, and it didn't make sense. But if somebody wants to buy their way in, I think that's the obvious one. Do I see us going all the way to 150-person exit right now, like 500-person, private equity event right now? No, but talk to me in 3 years. Everyone changes, right? I don't want to be super linear set on one particular event. I'm just going to roll with the punches. I want to build a really profitable business so that it's profitable and makes money for me and my family. If that's attractive to somebody else in 5 years, so be it.
Yeah, and you're not one of these people that ever got lost in middle management. Like you've always stuck
No.
to.
Yeah. So many people get into recruitment but don't actually want to do recruitment, right? I think it's one of these interesting things. Like, all I need to do is get here and I can stop doing recruitment and I can start telling other people how to do recruitment. So many people are desperate to do it. It was always kind of my biggest fear is like I'm a fairly mid-tier, like standout like leader. Like I look at some leaders and I'm like, wow, you're very good. You're very good at training people from nothing into something. You know, I always kind of describe myself in US terms as like a bit of a college coach, which is I can't teach you how to throw the football or whatever, but can make it slightly better and can understand the decision making. And you know, I turned 400k billers into 800k billers, etc. But I definitely didn't build them from nothing. And that, you know, that's what I'm hoping to emulate here. But I didn't enjoy the management. I didn't enjoy the strategy calls or the, you know, 3 day sleepaway camp. Let's all get the leadership together type meetings. I'm a doer. Like I like to do recruitment. I like to execute on plans. I like to make money, but I don't like to sit around a table for 10 hours and discuss a strategy. Like just let me go and do it. And one of the things I kind of felt, and you know, one of the reasons I exited my previous position was like, I'm doing less of this, and my value to the industry is talking to clients, even still doing searches, and I've found myself strapped away from that, and that's the skill that got me to where I am. And then I just become another generic middle manager in recruitment, and that doesn't like who's going to hire me if or I can't really set up on my own as a generic middle manager. So for me, my skill was always be a really good recruiter first, and I'll never be short of a job. And you know, anyone would hire me as a recruiter standalone, or I could set up my own business.
I know it's kind of like being left out to pasture, isn't it? I think like a lot about what I do all day, and I've been asked a few times recently, like, what are you up to? Like, and I'm like, well, I just want to create things for recruitment founders to buy with his people, systems, events,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And I just want to continue to do that. But the only way I can continue to do that is to speak to the best Neds, the best founders, and the best recruiters. And I don't do anything else outside of that. So
yeah,
I'd be afraid to lose that piece because then you don't know what the problems are.
Yeah, exactly. And the second you stop talking to your market, and I've seen this, right? Like managers who haven't been on the tools for 5 or 10 years, and you're telling me how to do something or suggesting that I do something this way, but you're wrong. Like the technology has changed, the way people interact has changed, like decision-making process has changed, right? We're very digital now. Like I think I read a report that in the next 10 years, 80% of decision makers will be millennials. So they're going to make digital decision-making processes like not, hey, get on the phone, get on the phone, get on the phone. I understand that you need to talk to people, but annoying people like the good old-fashioned days of the 2000s, like you start to piss people off now versus, you know, actually understanding the psyche of your decision makers process, which is why I always want to stay in the game. And I get that this probably, you know, is not going to be me forever. You know, if this business grows to 15 plus, I either got to hire a CEO, which is not something I'm necessarily against, or I got to step away. So it's two definitely like pretty big decisions that will come to me in the next few years that I have to be big enough to take. Because I think like there's so many, I see it, you know, in some of the recruitment channels and stuff like 50, 100 people businesses that like kind of get stuck in that middle of like still trying to be a good biller, but also trying to make like huge strategic decisions. And there's a point where you have to kind of drop one or the other. And, you know, it's something that it's a decision I'm not really looking forward to, but something that I'm going to have to make at some point.
Yeah. The search firm owners never do, and they're happy. Yeah. So I don't know, like it definitely does change. I need variety. So like right now I'm working on something and I'm putting a few pieces together and my day is pretty free. Like I'll do this, I'll speak. I've got 3 decent candidates that I spoke to on Friday that I'm excited about. And my team will present them out and make all that happen. And people give me calls and all that stuff's fun and it's interesting. And there's always something else and something different to do. But if I was to have to do middle management, run a P&L all day, I'd walk in front of traffic. So
I'll be holding your hand. 2 for 1.
2 for 1. I know, but you have to do it to get to a structure. Like
Of course.
it is. So you you went out on your own. Did you have any potential business partners that you were thinking about, or was that a big decision? And before you go into that, what was
Yeah.
the day you decided to set up?
Good question. I think a lot of people knew I would do this before I actually knew myself. Something you mentioned to me years back, like,
Yeah.
surely this is happening to you. Like, I remember you mentioning it, like, obviously you're going to do this. And, even people I worked with, like, oh, when are you doing this? Clients, like, thought it was your business, etc. So
I
and
would have thought
then,
it because you were into it. Like,
yes, yeah.
so there's that
And
obsessive compulsive thing where I'm like, that nobody's going to be able to control that.
yeah, and I'm on top of that, I know that, like, I'm not an easy person to manage because I am obsessive, and I have, I do have I will never say yes because just because, right? Like, I need to know why. So I think, there were certain things that I saw from a pattern of, I got through all the promotions that I could, and I still couldn't really influence that change. So towards the start of last year, I had those conversations internally of like, hey, I feels that this might be coming. I want to air this and see if I'm not just thinking this. And I think, it reached that eventuality that, towards the start of last year is when I thought about it. I then put things on pause. So I wanted to have my kid in April. And so that was a priority. And then, like, as soon as I got back, I knew that my heart wasn't really in working for a business. And so made that decision. Had plenty of interest from an investment standpoint, had plenty of interest, started to vet potential, like, true partners to come with me. And decided that, I used one of the shops to help me set up from a platform perspective, and was super useful. But I really wanted to do this my own way. And so I wanted to own the full stake of the business, drive it myself. And so, I was fairly kind of adamant on that. And then, from an investment standpoint, I was fairly careful around money for the last couple of years so that I could not pay myself for 6 months, a year. Sold my Porsche, like, was fairly kind of smart around how I wanted to do this, because I didn't want to just get out there and make dumb decisions, try and get invoices in really quickly. I wanted to be really process driven about this. But yeah, kind of took some time off. I left at the end of July. I started mid-September, so I took 6 weeks out. Probably retrospectively, I probably should have taken a bit longer, but I missed the game, right? You know me, I'm obsessed. Like, I want to do this. And 6 weeks on my hands, I was getting a bit bored. So kicked things off mid-September, made my first hire in November. And those first 8 weeks were miserable. I was so lonely. I didn't realize it's going to be quite that difficult. Because it's really, not being, and particularly my wife doesn't work. I left a really comfortable situation. So if I've had a bad day, I definitely can't go to her because she's going to panic and worry about the scenario. So for me, it was a case of having somebody on board that I can have these discussions with when things don't go great was amazing. But now, like, could not be, wish I did it sooner. That's what I said to everybody. I wish I did it sooner, but yeah, really grateful that I made that decision.
Good stuff. When are you buying back the Porsche?
So I had to have a think about when I'm going to get myself a new car, and what triggers. So we've had a good month, and I could not hire somebody in Q2 and go and buy it then. I've decided to be pragmatic and choose a person. I'm looking at the Audi Q8 RS as my next toy. So I would imagine that if we carry on like we are, summer. I probably didn't even need to sell it. We got off a little bit faster than I thought, but I just wanted to cure my paranoia and kind of not have to make bad decisions. So I miss it for sure. It was amazing. Loved every second of owning it for 2.5 years. But yeah, hopefully I have a new fancy toy by May, June, July time.
Lovely. Any message to anybody who's thinking of setting up by themselves or moving to America or following the journey that you've done?
So I'll start with moving to America. I think this is like for me, it was the best decision I've ever made. Like it is like it will leapfrog your career. I was a fairly mediocre biller in London for 2 years. I was a 100, 200 grand biller. I had the opportunity to come to the US, and my life is way further ahead than I ever thought it would be. The opportunity the recruitment has afforded me, the cities I've lived in, New York, Los Angeles, spent a year in San Diego, like loved every moment of it. And so anyone who's thinking about it, I also know people that have come here for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and just had the best times of their life, made more money than they thought, and gone home. Home isn't going anywhere. But I've also seen people come here, be part of huge exits, make more money than they even fathomed that they could even bill, let alone make. And so, ultimately do it. Like there's so many great options out there, and the worst case you do is go home. I could never recruit in the UK again. My wife would love for us to live in England and go do recruitment, but I just like can't imagine going back to 10% rates and nobody knowing who I am. So not for me. Setting up on your own is a slightly more nuanced question. I think everyone at face value is like, yeah, go do it. But I think the first thing you have to think is like, okay, can I still recruit? Because some people have passed that. Am I organized enough to take care and document everything I do, particularly in the US, because there's a lot of like tax crap and stuff like that that you have to manage. And thirdly, like, can you deal with the level of emotional attachment to deals that you used to? Remember when you were a rookie and that first interview, like first deal, like it brings you all the way back to those raw emotions when you're a business owner, which is great, right? Because I hadn't felt anything for years when I did a deal or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, great, another deal. Like, but it will really drag you back to like, wow, like displacement, or you have a dropout. Like when it's like 30, 50, 70 grand and it's your money, like bang, like it hits. So you got to be ready for that, back to the level of emotional attachment that it was like your first week on the sales floor when you got a contractor at final.
Oh man. Well, look, good advice there. Look, Stuart, will you come back on when you've got 10 people?
Yeah, deal.
All right. Done. All right. Thanks so much for coming back on. Really appreciate it. Best of luck for the future.
Yeah,
I'm
good
sure you'll
fun.
do great.
Appreciate it. Good fun. Thanks for having me.